Hello everyone and welcome to a new video in the Svelte D3 data visualization series where we code visualizations with the Svelte framework and D3, the well-known graphics library. And yeah, pretty soon I want to be able to code together with you this chart here, which is a basic line chart that is showing the global surface temperatures over all the 365 or 366 days of the year, and each line is 1 year, and you see here all the years from 1940 until basically today. So last year is this pink line, 2023, and you can already see how extraordinary warm this year was, and the blue line is this year, and we are now here in the mid of February. Let's see where it goes. So the data for this is already prepared, and today we're going to talk about loading the data in a Svelte app using a few functions from D3 as well, and using a lot of the magical function stuff, i.e. stores of Svelte. So let's have a look. We have the data here in the GitHub repository. I prepared it for you so we can see this is a CSV file with 3 columns. We have day of year, which is a number between 1 and 366. And then we have the year, and we have a value with it, which is the temperature, the global surface temperature in degrees Celsius. And we can see the format of the rows is not that intuitive. So we see, like, for all of the years now, the first day of the year, and if we scroll down, then there's the second day of the year, and so on and so on. But well, it doesn't matter. We have a dynamic JavaScript app which can take care of that later on. And we can just import the data by looking for the raw URL, and we can click on raw here, and then we get like here the direct URL of the CSV file. We can just use that. So let me go to my code editor and also to my development browser. We have our app.svelte here, and potentially we could now work, let's see here, Copilot is still on. Let's make it a little bit easier for you and disable completions. So we could just now load the data in our app.svelte, and we did that before. The thing is, loading data does not really have something to do with your components that you use to view something. So components are usually responsible to view something, to view a button, to view a chart, to view a headline, whatever, or to be a parent component for all of that. We can load the data there, but I prefer to separate the whole data loading and also data preparing or recalculation stuff inside a separate space in our Svelte app, and here we could use stores. And stores are JavaScript objects that are prepared by little helper functions of Svelte, and you can do a lot of stuff with it. Basically, it's just a variable which is reactive, so that means Svelte knows when the value of a store is changing. And this is interesting. I mean, you could think now, well, I'm just loading the data, there's nothing really changing. But let's see, it has some advantages here as well. So what we do when we want to load our data with a store, or we want to load the data into a store, I highly recommend to do that in an extra file. So we can just create a new file, which we call stores.js. And here I first put in the path to my data, which I have at the clipboard already. So that was the link, the URL to the data that we just had a look in GitHub. So now we want to build like a variable that we call data, and this variable should be available in all of our app components and wherever you need it. So we just put the export keyword here in front, so that means this variable is exported from that file and can be imported into other components and other JavaScript files, of course. And this data here is not just a normal variable, but it is a store. And Svelte comes with 3 different types of stores. There's a readable, a writable, and a derived store. And here we just use now a readable store, and we can create such a store by just invoking the readable function. And of course, we have to import this function from svelte/store. So this function, when invoked, gives us now a data store. So let's just have a look in our app.svelte. We can now go ahead and import this data variable from our stores file, which works like that. And this time we don't need like our HTML, CSS rendered view here in the browser. We only need our console. So I would just say, well, let's just do a console log of our data, and I put the $ here in front because I want to rerun console log whenever data is changing. And if I store that now, you can see that we get here in our console an object, and this object just has a subscribe function. And this is the minimal definition of a Svelte store. So it is an object which has a subscribe function, and the subscribe function, of course, is important for Svelte to know if the value of store has changed. All right. If we want to see the value of store, so now we're just getting like the inner workings of the store, the surroundings, you could also say. But if you want to have just the value of the store, which is most often interesting for your application, we can just put a $ here in front of the data. And then we're getting a new value, which is undefined, because we haven't done anything yet. So the value of our store right now is undefined. All right. So now let's load the data, and we can do that by first defining a default value. So I want to say that the default value of our store should be just an empty array. And if I store that, you can see, if I save that, sorry, you can see that now our store value is just an empty array. Let me reload the page and you can see it's just this empty array, nothing. And this is the default value here. All right, then there can be a second argument to this readable function. And here we could just put in a function which takes a set argument. And then let's also just put in the function body. So this is our function that we just put in now. And within that, we can basically now load the data. And as soon as the data is loaded, set the value of the store to our newly loaded data. All right, do you know how to load data from a CSV file? Well, this could be complicated, but not if you use D3. So as this is a Svelte plus D3 series, we could just use the CSV function from D3. And with that CSV function, we can just say, well, we call the CSV function. First argument is our data path. So this is the URL where to look for the CSV. And let's see what's happening here. So I would say we're just storing that in a loaded data constant. And as soon as this happened, we could just say set. This is like the argument that we get here into the function from the whole Svelte ecosystem. And then we just say we set the value with the loaded data. So let's see what's happening now. So we get now, let's ignore the TypeScript errors for now. I promise at some point I will do a TypeScript video, but it's not the focus for right now. We're just focusing on how Svelte works together with D3. We are getting now a promise, which is just saying, well, there's something going on and we're still waiting for it. The thing is that this CSV function really returns a promise. You might know promises because these were the things where we then did things like then and then do something when the data is loaded and so on and so on. I don't like the syntax that much, so what we can also do is we can make this function here, which gets the set argument, a so-called async function. Oops, we need the brackets here. So this is now an async function, and I will close here my file structure for a moment to get more space. So this is now async function, and in an async function I can also use the await keyword. And well, this might be just some other. So no TypeScript checking for now. So we are now doing this async await stuff. That means within an async function, I can use the await keyword, which means, hey, you have to wait until the data is loaded, then store the data in the loaded data, and then do the set. And now you can see, if I just reload the browser, there is an empty array first, and after a short while, which is the time that the browser needs to fetch the CSV, we are getting a new array which has now 31,000 and something entries. And if we look into these, we can see, hey, this is exactly our CSV. It's basically one object in the array per row in the CSV, and we get like day of year 1, value 11 point something, year 1940. Okay, cool. Now we have a CSV in a like JavaScript object, which is an array of objects in that case. It's a little bit bad that also the numbers now, like this is all numbers, the day of year, value and year is all numbers, and maybe we want to do some calculations or we want to use it for some scaling functions later on. It's a little bit bad that they are all strings now. So of course you could now go through this array and parse and make numbers out of the strings and stuff like that. But it's easier actually, so we could just use a second argument in the CSV function where we put in another function from D3, which is the autotype function, and we just also import that from D3. The autotype function is able to infer the right types of the object property data that is here. So let me just reload that. We get again our array, but now if I look into these objects, wow, it's not strings anymore. It's now already passed to numbers, and it's just that easy to use this autotype D3 function here. So this is really, really cool. So now we have our data loaded already, and of course we could use it now everywhere. So we did here just an import of the data and then just did the console log of the value. Of course, now you can directly go ahead and use that in some each loop, or you can do some rendering, whatever you like. Now, what I mentioned before is that the format, how the rows or how the data as such is arranged in the CSV file is not that optimal, meaning we have now all these different years. And if you remember, this was the original visualization. I want to have a line per year, like 2023, the pink line here is just 1 year, and then with all the days from 1 to 366. The thing is, well, I need to change my data structure a little bit to plot these lines later very easily. It would be nice if we do not have an array with like 301,000 entries, but if you would have an array for all the years, and then within the years the data for the specific years. So how do we do that? And it might be a good idea to do that in the store as well. So we could go ahead and just within like our readable store code some other functions that do the data tidy up automatically, more or less. But yeah, maybe it's good to keep the data as it is as well. So there is another option that we could do in Svelte. We could use another store type, which is, I'm just importing that already, the derived store. And with the derived store, we can take the data or the values of existing stores and create new stores with it. And that's what we want to do. We exporting that as well and do a data by year store, where we have now, that I described before, all the years, and within the years then the data for the years. And this should be a derived store, and a derived store takes as a first argument the stores that it depends on. In that case it was just the data, and then in the second argument we are using a function. So here we could say, well, the data goes into a new function where we calculate something, where we do some adaptations, recalculations, whatever. And it's important to know that here we're using data without the $sign. So here we're using the whole store, but here in the function we are working with the value of data, and that's why I and also the Svelte docs recommend to use the $sign here. In theory, it's doesn't matter what you code here, but just to understand what's going on here, I would use the $data, because now we are working with the value of data. And what I could do, I could just do a return data. That means that nothing is happening, and I can just use this data by years also here in my app.svelte. So I'm just importing data by year and then looking at the value of data by year, reloading it because there was some hot reloading errors, but now it's working. And you can see this is just the exact same array that we got before. All right, that's not what we want. We want to do it now by year. And well, of course, you can write quite some JavaScript for that. I here also recommend to just look into the docs of D3. There's a lot of mathematical helper functions, you could say. And there is, for example, a function which is called group. And what we can do is now we do not return the data as it is, but we can just apply the group function with the data. And it takes the second argument, which is a callback function. And here we just say d.year, which means, hey, run through this data, and with the accessor d.year, d being the individual objects here in my array, you know what to look for, and then group for this value. And then this group function looks, oh, well, yeah, there are a lot of 1940s because we're getting a lot of like values for this year. Every day we have a value in this year. And then it's grouping that under the umbrella of 1940. And it does the same for the other years, completely automatic. And if I store that and we are doing a reload, then we can see that now we have not an empty array, but we have an empty map. And a map is a special JavaScript object. I open that and you can see it looks like that. It has keys, and the keys are now the years. And then it also has values, and these are the 366 arrays, meaning this is then the data for these years. So just let's have a look here. Key 1940. And here for the values, we have the original objects, but only those that have a year equal to 1940, right? Now we can more easily work with that, because now each of these 85 years that we have here will be a line later on in our chart. All right, I guess a lot of you do not really know what a map really is. It's basically like an object where you can use the key to access values. It's pretty fast and nice to use, and also somewhat secure, so it's really good to use. But I understand if you want to have like plain objects where you have like these key and values as object properties and not inside this map construct here. So in that case, what you can do is, for example, we could also use the groups function with an S here. And then let's see what's happening. So just reloading. And now we are also getting an array with 85 entries. So this is the 85 years. But now it's looking differently. So these entries are two-member arrays where the first entry is the year and the second entry is the values. And with that, it's quite easy to use now the map function. So we can just now map over these two-member arrays. And what we could do basically is, so we're getting like here D, this is like the structure that you know from map. And I could now return a new object where I say, well, key should be first entry, because D is our two-member array. And we could say, okay, our values is then D and the second entry. So yeah, let's just have a look at that again. So we have here, the thing that I've marked now is the thing that we have in the console here on the right hand side. This is this 85 member array of two-member array where we have like all the years with their respective values. And now we are mapping over that. And we are using the first entry, which is the year, and we are using the second entry of the array, which is all the values. And if I store that, then this looks like that we have now objects that always have a key and these values here. And this looks like a nice way of how to structure this data set, because each of these 85 entries is a line later on. In terms of the JavaScript, we can make this a little bit prettier, because we basically can destructure this D here already in the function head. So what we could do is we could just say, well, let's get the key and the values. So this is like destructuring already the D, taking the first entry of the array into the variable key, taking the second entry of our two-member array into values, and then we could just write key and values, and this should give us the same, because it is in the end, it's just the same. That's it. So now we have the data in a very well format, and we could work with that. We have also access to the original data, which is this one here, because it's still exported. So we could just say, well, there is the data by year, just console logging that in an object. And the original data is also there. We just have to, import it as well from our stores file. And if we console log, you can see, well, here at first these arrays are empty because the data is not loaded yet. That takes time. It needs to load it from this GitHub URL. But then after it's loaded, everything is updating. We can see that we have in data a very large array with these 31,000 rows of the original CSV, and we had the data by year. And if you have a look into here, here's the original data again. And here's the data by year. And depending on what we need, we can just grab the one or the other. The good thing is this is just one single source of truth. The data is only loaded at one defined spot. And then you can arrange your data, you can recalculate stuff, you can combine stuff, whatever you want. And then you can use these store variables all over the place in your application. Thanks so much. And next time we'll look into the visualization of these bits of data here. See you, bye.